Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, was arguably the most anticipated movie of all time. If you were alive in 1999, even if you weren't a Star Wars fan, you couldn't avoid the hype. You were excited. It was a generational moment. Parents who grew up with the original trilogy that showed their kids the original trilogy were excited to see the new chapter and excited to have their children along for the ride. Our questions were going to be answered. Star Wars was going to be back on the big screen.
I think it was an excellent movie. I think Mr. Lucas did a fabulous job. Special effects are wonderful and the storyline was wonderful.
As a kid, I loved it. I had the toys, the books, even little pins to tack onto my jacket. I made stop-motion movies with my parents' camcorder, blasted the soundtrack in my room, and soaked it all up. And over the next few years, I slowly realized that I never put the Phantom Menace VHS in my family's VCR. It was always the original trilogy. As my teenage years progressed, my love for Episode 1 and my excitement for the continuation of the prequel trilogy kind of faded. It was a slow realization. The Phantom Menace didn't stick with me like I expected it to. When I did watch it, I found myself enjoying it less and less. Sure, there are some aspects of it that I liked, and still find enjoyable to this day, but I became critical of it, not purposely setting out to find flaws, but inadvertently finding flaws that just didn't feel right.
I think it was an excellent movie. I think Mr. Lucas did a fabulous job. Special effects are wonderful and the storyline was wonderful.
Still to this day, I think the casting was pretty great. Yes, even Jake Lloyd. The fault of the film doesn't land on the lap of a boy. He was a young actor, and I definitely think he takes way too much flack for his performance. All of the negativity towards him detracts from what was really wrong with the movie. He's an easy scapegoat for everyone to point a finger at, an easy target. Sure, when you look at the audition tapes, it's clear that there were better trained actors going for the part of Anakin.
I'm a pilot, you know. Someday, I'm gonna fly away from this place.
You're a pilot?
All my life. I'm a pilot, you know, and someday I'm gonna fly away from this place.
You're a pilot?
All my life. I'm a pilot, you know, and someday I'm gonna fly away from this place.
You're a pilot?
All my life.
I firmly believe that even if these other kids were picked for the part, the movie wouldn't have been any better. With the material that was provided for all of these actors to go on, I think they did as good of a job as they could have. I don't think you could have picked a better Obi-Wan Kenobi. Ewan McGregor is a fantastic actor. Outside of the Star Wars universe, his body of work speaks for itself. Natalie Portman is also fantastic. Her talent goes all the way back to the 1994 movie The Professional. Liam Neeson? I couldn't have imagined a better person to cast as a stoic Jedi Master. He was the man for the job. The cast was solid. Young up-and-coming actors, mixed with some veterans of the silver screen.
I think it was an excellent movie. I think Mr. Lucas did a fabulous job. Special effects are wonderful and the storyline was wonderful.
Looking at The Phantom Menace as its own thing, taking away the name and nostalgia of Star Wars, is it a good sci-fi movie? I mean, if it didn't have lightsabers, characters that we already know, and the name Star Wars, was it enjoyable? Was it memorable? I think it becomes way less memorable, way less enjoyable. The only thing that really saves it is that it's always going to be tossed in a box set, sitting next to its superior predecessors. If this movie was its own entity, I think it would have just been another sci-fi movie that failed to connect. But it does have the name Star Wars attached to it, so you do have to compare it. It's impossible not to. You can't review it as if it's Battlefield Earth, a one and done. You have to talk about it in the context of all Star Wars.
I think it was an excellent movie. I think Mr. Lucas did a fabulous job. Special effects are wonderful and the storyline was wonderful.
Sitting in the theater, bam! The Star Wars score comes blaring in. And then that classic Star Wars crawl sets the stage for the events to come. Rebel spaceships striking from a hidden base have won their first victory against the evil Galactic Empire. Rebel spies manage to steal secret plans to the Empire's ultimate weapon, the Death Star. And, oh, wrong crawl. The taxation of trade routes to outlying star systems is in dispute. The greedy Trade Federation has stopped all shipping to the small planet of Naboo. The Congress of the Republic endlessly debates, blah blah. Chancellor has secretly dispatched 2 Jedi Knights, blah blah blah. And with that, the tone of the Phantom Menace is set.
I think it was an excellent movie. I think Mr. Lucas did a fabulous job. Special effects are wonderful and the storyline was wonderful.
The movie is overall boring. There was no great kid, don't get cocky moments. There was no would somebody get this big walking carpet out of my way moments. The type of dialogue that made me chuckle as a kid, and still makes me chuckle. The banter that made the franchise so much fun was absent, replaced by something that feels sterile, feels too polished. People used to praise Star Wars for being gritty, taking place in a lived-in universe in a time where sci-fi movies were generally like Logan's Run, shiny, a perception of the future based on 70s fashion. Star Wars set itself apart. A space movie set in the desert? Even the actors didn't get it at the time, but it worked. It felt grounded. It felt strange, but relatable. Now, I will give the Phantom Menace credit where it's due. It definitely changed the landscape of movie making. No matter what you think of the film itself, a lot of credit should be given to ILM and everyone involved with the visual effects. Lucas dumped his own money into creating new, inventive ways of bringing visual effects to life. A lot of techniques that are used today in the realm of computer animation and graphics can and should be attributed to Lucas's accomplishments. Yes, some scenes in The Phantom Menace were 100% computer generated, and they stick out like a sore thumb nowadays. But I kind of look at it like an alpha stage, and what would be a forever evolving open source program for engineers to continuously tinker with. Jar Jar sucked. But Jar Jar led to Gollum. Jar Jar sucked asshole. But Jar Jar led to Davy Jones in Pirates of the Caribbean. Jar Jar sucked big flabby butthole, but Jar Jar led to Maz Kanata and Supreme Leader Snoke, two motion captured CG characters that will appear in The Force Awakens, played by Lupita Nyong'o and Andy Serkis. We don't know anything about them, so we'll see. So yes, there was too much emphasis on computer generated imagery in The Phantom Menace, but its influence funneled into the way movies are made. There's definitely a positive and negative side to its influence, but its influence cannot be overlooked.
I think it was an excellent movie. I think Mr. Lucas did a fabulous job. Special effects are wonderful, and the storyline was wonderful.
Now, this is all of my own opinion, obviously, but I feel like where The Phantom Menace went wrong was in the scale, the scope. The audience was introduced to too much, taken to too many places, didn't know where their focus should be. Should we focus on Anakin? Well, he's really not important in the movie. Doesn't really do anything except for accidentally blow up a space station because he's good at pod racing and has a bunch of midichlorians and is Darth Vader because we know he's Darth Vader and kind of sits around just asking questions. Looking confused, not really an important part of the movie that I guess is supposed to be about him. Everything felt way more convoluted than it needed to be. Way too convoluted for Star Wars. We didn't really need all these side characters detracting from a focus that wasn't well defined to begin with. We needed a focal point. That was just missing. Well, you couldn't have made it better. No, I never said I could have. My version of a Star Wars prequel would be way shittier than The Phantom Menace. Well then shut the fuck up. No. Which brings me to a revelation I had a long time ago. The prequel journey should have started with Anakin already being trained. This act of the story doesn't feel necessary at all to me. We should have started smack dab in the middle of the Clone Wars. Let the audience figure out the past through some clever expository dialogue. Nothing in The Phantom Menace feels necessary. So much so that thousands of people online have suggested that the correct viewing order of all 6 Star Wars movies is to skip The Phantom Menace entirely. They say that it's more of a small prologue at the beginning of a novel and shouldn't have been given its own feature. I think that statement makes a lot of sense. The pod racing sequence felt like a big visual effects test, and while it was well done, it just didn't have any weight to it. The battle on Naboo felt like another visual effects test, and yet again, while it was well done, it had no weight. A bunch of useless robots fighting against a bunch of Gungans who failed to connect emotionally with the audience. The battle where Anakin accidentally flies the starfighter into the hangar, yes, it looked pretty, but there was once again no weight to it. Absolutely no tension. The only thing that I find myself really enjoying in The Phantom Menace is the lightsaber duel at the end. But our protagonists are fighting against a bad guy who had like 2 lines of dialogue in the entire movie, who we knew nothing about other than he was bad, had a double-sided lightsaber, and wanted revenge or something for something or something. The lightsaber fight was great. It felt real. It felt grounded. Yeah, you could say it was over-choreographed, but they all were. And compared to the glow stick action of the following prequels, This duel is fantastic. What takes it down a few notches for me is that we really didn't have a good bad guy to root against. I'm fine with simple black and white explanations. For the most part, that's Star Wars, good guys, bad guys. But Darth Maul had no character to him. We knew nothing about him. He wasn't even poorly written. He wasn't written. People love Darth Maul, and I don't understand why. Yeah, he looks cool, menacing, I guess. The double-sided lightsaber was really neat to see, something different, a fresh, inventive take on the classic lightsaber, but that's all his character was. And I don't give a shit about the EU explanations. I've said it before, I want my film villains to be well written enough to where I don't have to open up a fucking book. But all his character was a dude with some face paint and a red stick. Visualization with no substance. And I really think he should have survived the end of the film. He should have been the main adversary throughout the prequel trilogy. A bad guy that everyone can rally around. A Darth Vader of the new trilogy. And that's where this movie failed for me. It was pretty, had some flair, had some style, but the best written and detailed character in the entire movie is the most hated character in the entire saga. Jar Jar Binks. Right? Yeah. Jar Jar's character was the most fleshed out and detailed character in the entire film. We knew where he came from, we knew his motivations, we knew his goals, we knew his emotions. As audience members, we knew Jar Jar Binks more than we knew anyone else, which is funny. The character that everyone despises, me included, is the one character in the entire movie that we actually get to know on a personal and engaging level. Qui-Gon wasn't interesting. Obi-Wan had potential, but he didn't do much of anything other than sit on a spaceship, and we really didn't get to know him. Padme was along for the ride, and she was supposedly being hunted, but you would have never guessed it because there was no tension. Darth Maul was the flattest and most boring bad guy, and just didn't do anything. Really, he didn't do shit. He popped up and swung his lightsaber at Qui-Gon, and then Qui-Gon jumped on a spaceship. And that's it until the end. The real bad guys in the movie were some gullible post office workers with an army of Roger Rogers. I set out to write this review in a positive tone. Then I started up the movie, opened up a notepad file, and just started writing. There are a few things that I liked. I liked the setting of Coruscant. We had never seen anything like that before in a Star Wars movie. It was kind of cool to actually see the Jedi Council at work, though it wasn't written very well, it was still neat to just see. Naboo was pretty, but it would have been way more interesting to see it start as a lush and vibrant place, and due to the warfare with the Trade Federation, turn it into a bleak and shattered planet where the consequences of war can be seen, not just on a battlefield that looked like something out of the Civil War with lasers. I like the idea of Palpatine being the puppet master, but it would have been way better if his puppets were fleshed out. Oh, and of course the music is amazing. Duel of the Fates is responsible for 50% of my Phantom Menace enjoyment. God damn, John Williams, how the hell do you do it?
I think it was an excellent movie. I think Mr. Lucas did a fabulous job. Special effects are wonderful, and the storyline was wonderful.
So, that's how I feel about the Phantom Menace in a nutshell. I could go into more detail about each scene, beat the dead horse of Jar Jar Binks being an asshole, laugh out loud at how everything has to be connected to one another, like 3PO being built by Darth Vader, give me a fucking break, or talk about why more of the individual components just fell flat. But it's really all been said before, and a lot of it on this channel. And oddly enough, I still have a little bit of love in my heart for this goddamn movie, and I can't explain why. I roll my eyes, I pick it apart, I recognize its intense flaws, but for some reason that escapes me, I find myself drawn to it. On to episode 2.
Always with you, what cannot be done.